So we do like 3 recipes. We announce the meal plan. Talk about food. We can call it Real Meal TV, Real Time. Well, it's like a reel because it's real meal, and then it's real because it's like the reel of the camera. Time because it's time with me, but time's also a herb. Welcome to another episode. The meal plan for this week is clean and green. That is 7 days of nothing but the green list. And from that meal plan, I'm going to cook you 3 recipes: Jamaican baked jerk fish, chicken livers peri peri, and then a recipe from the kids' book, Raising Superheroes or Superfood for Superchildren, called Green Eggs and Ham, named after the Dr. Seuss book. So the meal plan this week is based on the green list, which is a list of really nutrient-dense, low-carb foods in our original book, The Real Meal Revolution. And the idea behind the green, orange and red list comes from SASI, which is the South African Sustainable Seafood Institute, which is a WWF initiative. When I was working in restaurants back in 2003, they launched an initiative to educate consumers on what fish they could eat to support sustainable fishing practices. So all of the red listed fish were fish that were being overfished, and everything on the green list was supposedly safe, and orange was sort of maybe go slow, kind of like a traffic light. So when we wrote Real Meal Revolution, I wanted to have the same idea applied to the foods we eat that will help us lose weight or improve our health. And that's what gave birth to the green, orange and red list. A few years later, we wrote this book, Real Meal Revolution 2.0, and we refined those lists after having quite a lot of feedback and many debates. It took us forever. In fact, it took us so long that on my birthday, the publishers gave me this framed original version of the lists with scribbles and categories and arrows going everywhere. It came with a little Harvey Specter quote on the back as well. 97% of the people who gave up are employed by the 3% who never gave up. Harvey Specter. So if you look at the green list, you'll see there are a few categories. There's fruit and vegetables, drinks, proteins, condiments, fertilizers, and fats. And basically each one of them has a few criteria. So a lot of people think that our green list is based on 5 grams of carbs per 100 grams or less, I think. But the idea is that these are low carb ingredients and low carb vegetables. There's nothing expensive and way out there. When you look at drinks, you'll see that it's caffeine-free herbal teas, flavored waters, and that's not flavored with cordial, that's flavored with like a slice of fruit. Obviously sparkling water will give you a little bit of texture if you're missing the sweetness. And finally, normal water. Now, I know that might seem tough to go and give up all those things, but that's what we're designed to drink. So it's kind of like weird that we rely so heavily on fizzy drinks. Anyway, moving on to proteins. Proteins, all meat, all fish, all seafood, and all offal, which is also meat, but some people think that is a different type of thing. Nutrient dense. And then condiments, vinegars, mustards, olive oils, seasonings like herbs and spices. Those are all available and you can eat them to your heart's content. And then this little section over here called fertilizers. These are foods that we think either rebuild the gut lining, like bone broth, for instance, which is full of collagen and a whole lot of minerals, or foods that are good for impregnating, is it impregnating? Impregnating the gut biome. Good for your gut bacteria. So things like sauerkraut and fermented foods, coconut yogurt, kefir, milk kefir, kimchi, and naturally fermented pickles. So those are called fertilizers because you got to fertilize the garden to keep it blooming. And then fats. These are not fats like canola oil and sunflower oil. These are fats like butter, coconut oil, animal fat, and then fruit oils. So oils that are pressed from the seeds of fruits, and olives actually a fruit. Who knew? So that's the green list. When we're deciding what to put on the green list, it's not just about carb count. And I'll give you a perfect example. Garlic is 33% carbohydrates, and sweet potato is 20% carbohydrates. But sweet potato we put on the orange list because you're likely to eat a whole sweet potato, in which case you may actually end up having too many carbs. Whereas there's no ways you're going to smash a whole head of garlic. And even if you do, I hope you only do that once every now and then for the sake of your friends and family. So 1 clove of garlic is not going to ruin your day or push your blood sugar through the ceiling. And these are things that we've taken into consideration. So it is a chef's take on low carb diets, but our whole take is that it should be delicious and sustainable, and not necessarily sustainable, or not only sustainable for the environment, but sustainable for you. And life without garlic is just, oh, stink. If you want these lists, remember you can download them for free. Just follow the link in the information section below. And if you want this meal plan, head on over to realmealrevolution.com, sign up. We release a fresh meal plan every single week. So this week's meal plan is called Clean and Green, and it is 7 days of only green listed recipes. So the dinners you're looking at are chicken livers peri peri, my favorite fiery beef salad, Jamaican jerk baked fish, some Parmesan chicken pieces with smoky moly sauce, beef and collie mash cottage pie, some smoky belly ribs with red slaw on your Saturday night, and for Sunday a very light supper of gammon and mustard pickled cabbage rolls. So first thing you're going to do is preheat the oven to 200. Then we're going to cut our fish into portions. About 200 grams a portion should be fine. Then we're going to pop them into a well-oiled baking tray or lasagna dish. Now we're going to whip together that jerk. So you're going to take your dry spices, allspice, peppercorns, cloves, and pepper, ginger. We're going to pound these together. Okay, now I'm going to tip these into a jug. And I'm going to add in the chilies, and the garlic, and the ginger, and the lime juice, and some onion, and the herbs, the thyme and the coriander. The reason I'm chopping this coriander is because if you don't, when these stems get cut up by the stick blender, they wrap around and they become fibrous, and you end up getting knots of coriander. And of course the magic ingredient, the double shot of dark rum. The recipe calls for xylitol. I don't really like xylitol, I'm leaving it out. Good glug of olive oil. And of course the spices. We're going to blitz it all into a nice paste. Okay, it probably needs a little bit of seasoning. Okay, that's perfect. Now we can pour this over the fish. So you get your fish, you just pour the marinade over, and then use your hands just to spread it over nicely. I'm going to bang this in the oven for 10 minutes. While that's baking away, I'm going to make shaved radish and cucumber salsa. So finely diced cucumber, and some finely chopped onions, and some finely diced celery, some shaved radish. I'm going to leave the top on because that's what I'm going to use as my grip on the mandolin. And a nice big handful of chopped mint. Mix that all together, add in a good twist of lime, and a massive glug of olive oil, and a crack of salt. And just leave that for a couple minutes while the fish is baking. Oh my goodness. We're cooking chicken livers peri peri, and the key to my peri peri dish is that we make the sauce first and then we decant it and then sear off the chicken livers in a very, very hot pan to get nice color, and then add the sauce back in at the end so that they simmer and finish off. We're going to make the sauce first by getting some butter hot in a nice heavy base pan and frying off the sliced onions. Once they're caramelized, I'm going to chuck in some chopped garlic and some fresh chili. Stir that around. So the moment that garlic and chili begin to caramelize, you're going to get some of that nice aroma coming through. We're going to deglaze that with some wine. Okay, so we're going to add the tomato puree. We're going to add the juice of a whole lemon. And we're going to let that simmer for a minute or two just for all those flavors to combine. Season to taste with salt and pepper. Tip that into a bowl, get the pan nice and clean, and get ready to cook the livers. Okay, so the next step is the chicken livers. We want to get the chicken livers very, very dry, and we want to cut out all the gallbladders. These gallbladders are about the size of the end of your pinky, and they're like bluey green. So we've got to cut those out, because if you bite into one of those, it's like biting into an uncured olive or biting into a gallbladder. And we're going to cut them into small enough pieces so that they're easy to turn in the pan. So if this is your liver, we're going to separate this into 2 pieces. Thanks, Lucy. And then once they're cut into small pieces, we're going to dry them out in a cloth. Now, excuse us while our dog finishes his temper tantrum. I'd like to introduce you to my running partner. This is Lucy. She's a poodle Italian water dog cross, otherwise known as a pool noodle. Say hello. What? Okay, so to dry off these livers, remember you want to get them very dry, get all that moisture away so they caramelize nicely. You want to use some thick, sturdy paper towel or dabbing it dry. Be careful you don't use thin paper towel, otherwise it sort of sticks to the meat. Or you can use an old, dry, clean dish towel, because that allows you to actually squeeze it a little bit harder and get all that moisture out. So we lay these livers out on the cloth and roll them up like a little cigar and squeeze them. And then unroll them again. And don't bother decanting them or tipping them into anything else. We can just season them right here on the towel. Crack of salt and pepper. This is going to make sure they color beautifully in the pan. Just leave them for a few minutes while you wait for this pan to get really hot. And I mean a few minutes, this pan needs to be smoking hot. You're going to stand back a little bit because the livers tend to spit, but as you pop them in, you'll see they start to hiss and spit, and that's perfect. You're going to wait about 30 seconds. And as you see these white bits coming up along the sides, they're ready to turn. So, and now we're just about ready to add the sauce. You can turn the pan off and take the livers out at this point if you want to do this later. You get your pan really, really hot, you add your livers in and your sauce in, and it'll all just boil together and you can serve it immediately, or you can use this heat to reheat the sauce by just pouring it in like this. And there we go. And while that's simmering away, you've got about a minute before these livers overcook. So quickly chop up some fresh basil, a big squeeze of lemon, mix it in, and you're ready to serve. This recipe is called green eggs and ham, and it's taken from Raising Superheroes or Superfood for Superchildren, which is what it's called outside of South Africa. And it is basically a frittata, but it's named after one of my favorite kids' books. I read this to my daughter all the time, and it's called Green Eggs and Ham. Basically, the story is there's this guy called Sam, and he's trying to convince his friend Joe to eat green eggs and ham, and the whole story, Joe is basically saying, no, I refuse, I refuse, I refuse. And right at the end, he tries out the green eggs and ham, and it turns out he's never tasted them, so he didn't even know whether or not he would like them. And then it turns out he loves green eggs and ham. So the whole idea is if you want to get your kids to eat more delicious food, you've got to get them to try stuff. And the only way you can get them to try is if you keep trying to get them to try over and over and over again. So if you do have this book and you do read it to your kids, you can make them this frittata and tell them that it's from Dr. Zeus. So there are 2 ways you can do this recipe. There's the way in the book, which means chopping things up and mixing them. And then when you cut your frittatas open, you have little pieces of spinach and ham and cheese. And then there's the way that you can really make the eggs green, which is by using a stick blender and the cooked spinach. So I'm going to show you both ways, but I'm going to just split the batch in half. So if you're wondering why I'm cutting cubes instead of grating cheese, that's why. First thing we're going to do is get the spinach cooked. You can do this 2 ways. You can either saute the spinach in butter or olive oil, or you can blanch it or steam it. You could even cook it in the microwave. Get my large pan up to a medium-high heat. I'm just going to use a little bit of olive oil. Okay, that's nice and hot. I'm going to drop the spinach in. Just pop the lid on and let that steam for a bit. And before it burns, I'll just toss it around and take it off the heat. Now we're going to chop the ham and the cheese. You can use any ham you like. If you wanted to take it to the next level, you could use chorizo or some prosciutto, but I would say this is the more affordable option. I'm going to do half the cheese in cubes, and then the other bit I'm just going to grate. So we took the spinach out, we're going to divide it by two. Half's going to go in the green batch, and the other half I'm going to chop. Let's just make these eggs green. I'm going to separate my tablespoon of milk between the two batches, and then I'm going to give them a good crack of salt and black pepper. Put a little bit of ham in each one. So I'm using individual cups, but you could use any muffin tray and it'll work just as well. Or a lot of ham. That cheese is going to be super filling. Then we're going to put chunks of cheese in the other ones. I'm going to pour in my mixture. Goes with the grated. Now I bang them in the oven. That's it for this week. Thanks very much for watching. If you'd like that meal plan, please go to realmealrevolution.com, join the online program, and remember all the recipes we cook on this show are from our books and the online program. All that information is below. If you want to download the green list, there's a link to that below, and please click on the links to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And finally, please subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss next week's episode. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.